Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another edition of Adam Interviews, where we are talking with people who are doing extraordinary, exceptional work in our community. And today we're going to be talking to someone who is about to do extraordinary, exceptional work in our community. We're talking about Dr. David Greenberg. Dr. Greenberg, thank you so much for joining us for this show.
My pleasure. I'm delighted to be here.
So just as a little bit of background, Dr. Greenberg has done a lot of work. He's a neuroscientist. He's done a lot of work in Cambridge and other places on the impact of music and health. And the first question I have for you, Dr. Greenberg, is when we talk about this, we've seen the movies, we've seen the TV shows, we've read the books about, someone coming in and playing music and people feeling better. But you're actually looking at the potential direct impact of music and its elements on people's minds.
That's right. So in previous decades, especially when music therapy first began to emerge in the field, which was after World War II, in work with trauma victims, most people didn't really understand what it was about music that was helping people in terms of their mental health and also physical health. And it was kind of you could call it a kumbaya problem. That is, you play music, something special happens, and people get better, but we don't necessarily know what's happening in the music. And now, fast forward to today, especially with very precise measurement tools and instruments, and especially now with machine learning and artificial intelligence, we could really start to actually pinpoint the aspects in the music that are contributing to change and how it's changing, for example, the brain. And we can pinpoint things um, about the relationship between the music therapist and the patient. And so we can now look at it at a micro level. So looking at the microacoustical level, looking at the fine details of how it's impacting the brain and which brain networks, and then how it impacts ultimately on behavior. And of course, looking at this across many, many different populations, all the way from neonatal development to dementia and Alzheimer's in old age. So it's a very exciting time because we don't have a kumbaya problem anymore. We're now at a place where we're really understanding the specifics about mechanistically what's happening to facilitate change at a neuroscience level and also at a behavioral level. And what I'm hoping to bring to Rochester is a focus not just on music and medicine, as the title of the professorship has, but also precision medicine, because a lot of my work in the past has focused on musical preferences and the links with personality and psychological characteristics. And not everybody likes the same music, and music doesn't affect everyone the same. And in that way, I'm very hyper focused on how we can create a personalized experience for each individual based or patient based on their goals, and to really bring music not just as medicine, but as precision medicine.
So you mentioned the professorship. So Dr. Greenberg is going to be coming in and working within the Eastman School of Music, but he's going to provide a bridge of sorts to URMC. I mean, that's how serious that U of R is taking this, which I find fascinating. Again, this is not kumbaya stuff, but rather looking at this like a legitimate treatment as they would other medical treatments that we consider legitimized at this point. So before I just have to say, before we kind of drill down into this, love the background there. Where are you right now?
So I'm glad it kind of looks like I'm somewhere special, but it's a virtual background and
Oh,
looks.
I'm sorry. Of course. I'm so old. I am so old.
No, I
Um,
was playing around with some of the effects to try to, catch you off guard.
oh
But
my goodness.
no,
How
this is
embarrassing.
actually this is actually in Eastman
Oh,
school.
okay.
Yeah. So
All
I
right.
figured to this it would be apropos.
Yeah, exactly. A preview of what's to come. Um, so what I find interesting is the potential, and you've done research into this, so I don't even want to say it's necessarily potential, the very real relationship between music and how the brain operates. And I'm curious to know, first I want you to get into that, but why does it operate in that way when speech does not? I mean, what's the difference between music and me speaking right now? Why does it have a different result on the brain?
So there's many different elements within music itself from speech, and there's many evolutionary theories that have been developed about how speech and music overlap. One, for example, is that a theory that music and language evolved together over time with our human ancestors called language, a combination of music and language. And then eventually it broke apart and language became more of a cognitive aspect, and then music more of an emotional aspect of everyday life. And there's many more theories that have been developed, but we also know now neurologically that language and music, there are overlapping regions of the brain that process language and music, and there's also distinct areas that of the brain. And so when we look at music, you have music listening and you also have music making. And so with language, if we're having a conversation here, there's very specific pauses and things that we may expect. Like at the very beginning of the conversation, I'll expect you to say hello and vice versa. But then there's other things like surprises, for example, the virtual background that I have. And music, in many ways, is this similar, where you'll have certain expectations, and those expectations in music can either be confirmed, or they can kind of be a little bit off and interesting. And that's what kind of makes not just human relationships, but music so interesting and exciting and really an element of discovery. And just, last that I'll mention on it, this link between language and music and also the differences between that is that music itself, it exists within a time-space continuum, meaning that you have a rhythm oftentimes within music that would be considered like the pulse, in the same way that you have a heartbeat that's pretty steady, and the music exists within that pulse, within that time-space continuum. And then you add on top of that all of the emotive and the acoustical elements, the kind of screen of sound, or the wallpaper of sound, the tapestries. And in there's different elements of emotion that are also music specific, that's some argue are separate than language, that music actually evokes within us different sets of emotions and different types of emotion that than language can. And so it's a very exciting frontier, and especially when it comes then to therapy. Some people, myself included, is that when talk therapy or when words aren't enough, music is the answer. And music has that ability to actually reach and kind of penetrate walls and emotionally and cognitively.
All right. Well, I'm going to get you like go take a drink of water there. So while he does that, I'm going to point out that we have the Eastman School of Music has really been at the forefront of a lot of this, and I think that it's a testament to their growth in this area that they've attracted Dr. Greenberg to the Rochester area because Dr. Greenberg, as I noted, you're in Cambridge. How specifically did they find you? I mean, it seems like a perfect marriage right here because this is such a niche field.
Well, it there was a bit of synchrony involved, and it's not every day that a university will post for a professorship in music and medicine. And um, there's very, very few around those in the world, and there's few people who also study that. And even more unique and rare is having a world-class medical school and a world-class music conservatory that is both looking to merge together and create something special together. And it's begun to do that with work at the Eastman Performing Arts Medicine Center, where I'll be director of research. And the director there, Galen McCormick, has done incredible work already. There's about 2,000 music therapists interspersed within hospitals at Rochester providing free music therapy each year. And one of the things I'll be doing is stepping in to help evaluate and really understand kind of the things we were talking about before about the brain mechanisms that are helping facilitate change in terms of physical and mental health. And it's really a one of a kind position, and it's a one of a kind opportunity. And like they say, right place, right time, and hopefully I'll be the right person.
Yeah, and you've done a lot of work when it comes to music and autism. If you could talk about that, the relationship and what you've learned through your studies and observations in that realm.
Hmm. So, a lot of my work in autism is understanding what autism is in terms of what we would consider phenotypic characteristics, and also to understand what types of modalities, including music therapy and specifically improvisational music therapy, can be helpful for kids and adults who are autistic. And right now, for example, we're finishing up a clinical trial at Cambridge where we went into the schools and are comparing 200 different autistic kids who are engaged in improvisational music therapy and comparing those to autistic kids who don't have music therapy. And when you think of autism, there's kind of two. There's autistic people who have their verbal ability intact, and then those who aren't, who have limited verbal ability. And across both of those kind of subtypes of autism, is a often a difficulty and a challenge within social situations because those situations are very unpredictable and very confusing. And in that way, music is a very different modality than, say, talk therapy or other types of modalities. And other modalities, even pharmaceutical drugs, antidepressants, there's evidence that it's not so effective when it comes to helping autistic people with anxiety and depression. And music is a new channel, a new way that can reach autistic people, can develop a way of communication that doesn't rely on language or social cues that may be unpredictable or confusing.
That's so interesting. And I remember reading an article in the New Yorker about this father, I mean, parents, but the father was in the room with his child who had become nonverbal with autism, and he loved Aladdin. And they were sitting on the bed, and the dad randomly picked up the stuffed animal of Iago and started talking. And without even a hesitation, the boy started talking back, and it was this revelatory moment. And I bring that up. Um, not to say that verbal communication can also find different avenues, which it can, but once you do that, as the parents found out, you can build upon that and then help stretch the development of that child. And so I'm wondering if in music it's kind of the same way. This provides a foundation on which you can start to help in different ways that might not even involve music.
No, absolutely. And there's been books written about it. It's not an uncommon occurrence what you're describing. And I've actually also been in the room with parents and their autistic kids when they've had breakthroughs using music and sound as a way to facilitate um, being able to increase communication with each other or even language. One example was doing reels on the bus, and rather than singing reels on the bus go round and round, they would insert breaks. So wheels on the bus go, and then eventually the in this case that I was in the room of, the child then filled it in. And it's a brand new emergent area of research in terms of the neuroscience of prediction, and it hasn't yet been applied to autism. And that's one area where I'm really hoping to be able to contribute at Rochester and also for the field is to take what um, I've done and what my colleagues have done at Cambridge and also at McGill and Stanford and other places to really be able to take our knowledge about what autism is and what modalities are most likely to be accessible to not cause any harm, and for to be enjoyable as well, so that we can help autistic people not feel as lonely, as anxious, as depressed, because we know that autistic people have higher rates of anxiety, depression, and also, unfortunately, suicidality and suicidal ideation than non-autistic people. It's a major concern, and music is a modality that is doesn't have any negative side effects, that has a lot of potential here.
Yeah. And I think when we talked at the top of this conversation about how people have seen the impact of music already, I talked about TV shows, but look, we've seen it in senior living facilities with, or with people with Alzheimer's, how they might be nonverbal or they can barely remember anything, and yet they remember a song from 30, 40, 50 years ago. And then I remember a coworker was listening, I heard music, or what I thought was potentially music, coming out of his office, and it was something linked to heavy metal, but it was nothing like I had ever heard, and he was using it as almost like a calming mechanism, and I just thought that was incredible, and it just goes to show that there are so many layers and potentials there. So I was curious to know what a treatment might look like. I mean, do you perhaps instead of saying, "Oh, we're going to play Metallica for you now," it's rather, are you going to break it down to its building blocks and then apply it individually? Do you use AI? How does that look in your world 20, 30 years from now?
Okay, yeah. So, 20, 30 years from now, I can paint a picture of what it looks like now and then extend it 20 to 30 years.
Perfect.
So, right now, I'll break it down just very simply into there's music-based interventions and music therapy that is focused on music listening with a patient, and then music making with a patient or with a client. And music listening can be something like listening to your favorite music, but then describing a story underlying it, and then talking about how that story relates to certain past events, for example, that may have been traumatic. But there's also the music making side, and I've done a bit of research with colleagues at University of Chicago and at Bar-Ilan University, looking at what happens in the brain when people are making music together, and looking at the effects of oxytocin and cortisol and so forth. And in that scenario, we also look at improvisation, and also improvisation, as I've alluded to before, in autism. And in that, what that would look like is that you have a autistic, let's say an autistic child, and the music therapist in the room, and the therapist would not just play songs for the child, but would allow the child to take initiative and begin to play music around the room, to choose their instruments and then be able to engage. And ultimately, they're telling a story throughout the music that they're playing, and it develops then a creation, and they can engage in a musical dialogue, so without needing words or language, and through they could communicate through the music itself, and in the way that you were describing, in the situation with Aladdin. And so that's what it looks like. Now, where does it look in 5 years or 30 years from now? Well, I'll tell you, in 5 years, what I'm hoping is that this will all become, and this is what I mentioned at the very beginning, is personalized. That what we'll ultimately be able to do is to take the information about somebody's mental health and psychiatric and neurodevelopmental conditions, and then also be able to understand what their phenotypic personality traits are, also understand perhaps the level of brain activity, and then be able to, I would say, quote unquote, prescribe a musical intervention for them that will work. And that musical intervention can include music making exercises, making engagement, music listening with very specific attributes that are known over time, to be able to help that client and also reach them towards their goals. So, really, with an engine that's based off of what would be called reinforced learning, which is under the umbrella of artificial intelligence and machine learning.
How
Um,
fascinating.
yeah, and I'll just add that in 30 years, the main next kind of step after that
Hmm.
is one of the research that some of the findings that we see is that many people around the world, we've done this with about 20 different countries, uh, are interested in having music therapy for themselves or for their child, but on I think it's about 60% are interested or would want to use that as a initial place to go to, but only 5% have access to it. And this is because of geographic issues. This is because of insurance reimbursement issues, and this is also because of music therapy. Even though it's a very growing and emergent field, there's less music therapists than like speech therapists. So, in 20, 30 years, what I'm working towards is making music therapy accessible to everyone, on not just in the US, but beyond. So that whether it's a live music therapist or it's a virtual music therapist, with assisted with perhaps AI a bit, or if it's automated games that are therapeutic, is to be able to have people access music therapy anytime, anywhere, and especially for those who just don't have access or aren't able to afford it.
Well, that would be wonderful. That's fantastic. By the way, I want to let you know that I'm pretty much done with my embarrassment cycle over the fact that I thought you were actually in a concert hall.
I,
Um,
I have to do admit I spent about 5 minutes trying to find the one that would be least obvious.
well, congratulations, you fooled this guy. So it's interesting, by the way, going back to your comment about how um, it appears that our ancestors at one point used both music and speech, and then it kind of like separated. And I wonder if this is intentional, but I just finished the book Project Hail Mary, which is going to be a movie in March. Super interesting book. And the alien in that actually spoke in music, which was fascinating. And they kind of explored that type of communication, what that meant. Um, so, my question to you is, as I noted, this is a very niche field. How did you find your way into it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one that, for me, my understanding of where it began is when I was actually 2 weeks old. And at 2 weeks, I was diagnosed with a congenital birth defect, had to go urgently into the hospital and have an operation, which was life saving. And afterwards, my grandfather, who was an electrical engineer, and knew how to deal with the wires that were attached to me from in the in the NICU, he spent a lot of time with me. Specifically, on one day, it was just him. My parents were told to, after 48 hours of not sleeping, to get rest. And my grandfather sang songs to me, and specifically he sang songs that were probably sung to him by his father and grandparents. And those songs, I was always curious what they were because I had heard that from my parents that when they had come back from the hospital, or from back to the hospital, that the nurses were all kind of in a saying how beautiful it was that my grandfather was singing, and he was a lover of the opera, but I think these songs that he was singing were from the Jewish tradition and in Hebrew. And I never knew what they were. My grandfather passed when I was 5 years old, 5 or 6 years old. And then all of a sudden, when I'm in my mid 20s, I have an earworm. And an earworm is, if you or anyone watching isn't familiar, is when you have a song that's just stuck in your head. And I had this song that just was repeating, repeating, and not just for a week, not just for a month, it was like 6 months. I wouldn't even realize when I was singing it.
Hmm.
And one day in this time period, I came across a home video I'd never seen before, and it was of my grandfather and me, just right after I had gotten out of the hospital. And there's this moment in the video where he looks up at the camera that my dad was filming, and my grandfather says, "Do you want to hear David's favorite song?" And he starts singing the same song. He goes, "Lecha dodi lekrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela." And I'm listening, and watching this as a 20-something-year-old, I start crying. It was the same song that it was in my head. So somewhere that had really embedded into my memory and embedded into a deep-seated emotional experience. Some might even say a spiritual experience. And so that's how it started. And then my journey from there, fast forward now, I find myself in this very unique, incredible professorship in music and medicine, where now I can do studies in the hospital, in the NICU, focusing on neonatal development as well. So it's kind of coming full circle now, and that's my mission, to be able to use music in a way that is truly impactful, and that is not just going to create great science, but is also going to translate into a real world impact and help the lives of many.
That is incredible. And I remember you telling me earlier that when you were learning saxophone, you were just a terror to your teacher in the sense that you basically didn't want to learn the music as much as you wanted to learn about why the music you or your teacher was playing was having the emotional impact that it could have.
If there was in those lessons when I was at conservatory in at Rutgers, if there was a couch in the room, I would have had the teacher say, "Okay, sit down, tell me about your dreams last night," and I would just say, "Oh, okay." I had how did it make you feel when you were playing that B sharp up that time? But um, uh, I mean, there's not even a B sharp, a C, but that's kind of I would really pass them. I wanted to know where the music was coming from, what was the source of their inspiration, how it was linked to their personality, what it meant for them, and they would have to say, David, just shut up and let's play.
Well, it is. I always love meeting people with true passion, and then it is so comforting to meet those who not only have that passion but followed it. And I'm so glad that our society is advanced enough to accommodate that passion. And I'm also so grateful that we here in Rochester can provide a home for it. So, with that, I want to thank you for talking with us. And I want to tell you how much I'm looking forward to having you join our community. You're going to love it. And we're going to love having you here. And I hope to do a follow up interview in person one day, and maybe in the exact spot that you kind of are sitting right now.
Let's do that. Yeah, and then we could do a kind of a side by side.
There we go. There we go. All right. Dr. Greenberg, David, thank you so much for talking with us. We really appreciate it.
Good. Okay, thanks so much.
All right. That was Dr. David Greenberg talking with us from Not Eastman. And we're just so glad that he could make some time to chat with us. And I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes. And obviously, as someone who will be a patient one day in some way or another, I can only hope that among the other treatments I receive, I will be getting some music therapy as well, because I truly believe that there's something special there. And to be able to dig down deep into it is the best thing we can do. So with that, thank you all for watching another edition of Adam Interviews. We always greatly appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to learn more about the people around you. With that, take care, everyone.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.